Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 2 of the At the Pub podcast, where none of us are experts, but all of us have opinions. I am your host, Eric, or AKA From the Couch. I am joined here just by
Joe Swanson.
So it's just Seb and I today. Unfortunately, Mitch couldn't make it. He will be here for the next episode, but don't worry, he will be doing grueling physical labor for the next week here. So we got you, boys. Starting out just with some hockey news, I wanted to give a quick shout out to, I saw this on Instagram actually. It was from Jesse Pollock with Bar Down. So I thought it was fake when I first saw it, but it actually turns out to be pretty much legit. Prob Bethal, I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's a 14-year-old AAA U15 player in Winnipeg. This guy is putting up some of the craziest stats I've seen in a long time. I don't know if you've had a chance to actually look into them.
Yeah, I took a quick look there, but he's got 83 goals in 32 games playing for the AAA Thrashers.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's like it didn't even come out of nowhere either. Like the season before, it was less or so, but he had 46 goals and 73 points in 34 games, which is still crazy. But then Buddy just doubled it for no reason.
Yeah, that's unreal production, and I know it's U15 AAA, so it is what it is, but kid's only 14 putting up those numbers. Keeps that up going into the Western Hockey League or wherever he goes, and this could be a name to watch. Yeah,
for sure. No, I don't be surprised if you hear his name in the future. Keep it up. I don't know. I love that. I love when you just kind of find just a random kid you've never heard of that's just putting up crazy numbers. That's just the best.
Yeah, shout out to him.
Yeah, sure. Also in hockey news, Tom Wilson is suspended for 6 games for either reckless or some are arguing intentional, some are saying it was reckless. Either way, pretty stupid move on Gregor the other day. I don't know. I know we were talking a bit about it before, but my God.
Yeah,
I'm not exactly sure what he's thinking.
Just not only a terrible penalty from a guy who is known to do things like this. If you watch the clip, that is just a blatant slash to the face. I don't know what else you could call it. But it's also the fact that the Caps are in the playoff push, and I know they won last night, although it was an ugly, ugly game against the Hurricanes. But 6 games, those 6 games are going to decide their playoff future. And so the fact that he's out and can't help the team in that is just an insane move from a guy who's supposed to be a leader on the team. But at the same time, I'm not shocked. This is Tom Wilson. The only other guy who I wouldn't be shocked about doing something like this is Trouba. So I'm not even surprised. It's more just man, they had something really good going. And for all I know, they still make it. But Detroit seems to be figuring things out, and that's no bueno for the Caps. So good job, Wilson. 6 games out. You might have just helped cost your team a playoff spot, but oh well.
Yeah. I mean, they did pretty well against Carolina the other night without him. So I don't think they are down and out by any means. But it is worth mentioning that Wilson did apologize to Gregor, and Gregor accepted the apology. That is worth mentioning. Yep. But also, this is his 6th suspension in 11 years in the league. So he's been suspended for a little over half of this, at least once, a little over half of the seasons that he's been in the league. And I don't know, I don't know if I'm jumping to conclusions or if maybe this is a step too far, but if I'm the GM of the Caps, or if I'm their head coach or whatever, I'm having doubts about his future on the team, because I feel like you could trade him for someone who isn't such a kind of hothead and doesn't get so carried away. Because even in that clip, you can see, I think he was surprised that he did that as well.
Yeah,
he was surprised that
I think he's one of those classic hockey guys that just loses his temper and then takes it out on others, which is not a good thing. It doesn't shock me. I think the tough thing with Wilson is they just signed him to that, I think, like 5x5 contract earlier in the season. And he's supposed to be this key to their team. He's the leadership key. And so to have him pull stunts like that is... It's... You want to see more from a guy who's supposed to be a leadership figure. So we'll see where it goes. But great move. And if they end up missing the postseason because they get some... They have some goal-scoring troubles, it's going to be easy to point the finger.
Yeah, I'm very curious if they do miss a playoff spot because of this, or after this, I should say. Because they have like one of the toughest schedules.
Yes, I think they have.
Too.
If I'm not mistaken, I was looking at a stat the other day that in terms of games still remaining, they have the toughest schedule in terms of playing teams above 500 points percentage. So the Carolina game was messy last night, and a lot of it you could blame on Kochetkov not playing a great game. And if that's the case, I mean, they're going to run into issues playing against better goaltending in these next couple games. So it'll be interesting to see, but they really could have used Wilson there. Yeah,
no, like that game against Carolina, that was a really exciting game. That was a really great game. It was really back and forth. Both teams really refused to die. Like one team would score and then the other team would score like 2 minutes later. But yeah, no, like just to like peek at their schedule coming up here, in the next week they have Winnipeg, Detroit, Toronto, and Boston. That's just next week.
Yeah, that's a brutal schedule.
Yeah, and then they play Carolina again on the 5th of April. Tampa on the 13th, Boston again on the 15th. Like it's like, I know Tom Wilson will be back by then, but like still like that's kind of, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, what precedent are you really showing in the locker room? Because you also have the A, like you're not just another player on the team. Like it'd be kind of a different story, I feel like, and people wouldn't fixate it as hard if he wasn't a captain as well, like one of the captains. But like you said, like you have to kind of show by example, and like let them know that like, you can get hot-headed and it's good to get like emotionally invested in the game, but also be able to turn it down and like calm down and not slash guys in the mouth.
I mean, we'll see what happens, but based off of the past few times, I mean, he never really seems to learn his lesson. So we'll see if this is the time, but I don't buy it.
Speaking of seeing if someone's going to learn their lesson, Tortorella is facing some pretty harsh blowback from his scratch of Coots. What do you think? I think I don't know. I honestly haven't been following Sean Couturier that much. I don't know how his play has been.
He's been having an okay season after missing the past 2 seasons with that back injury. They weren't even sure if he was ever going to play again. And so the fact that he's playing again is great, but he hasn't been that good. And I know he was named captain just over a month ago, but to me that doesn't make you immune to a scratch. If anything, scratching a captain adds more to the effect of it in terms of you're sending a real message that not even the captain is safe. And he's been playing okay, but the Flyers were on a bit of a spiral as of late, and they've won both games post-scratch. So even though they were a bit ugly, the thing is that Couturier, when he's at his best, is a good two-way center. He's like a Bergeron type, where he's just hard to play in both ends, and I think ever since his back injury, he's been a little bit worse at the two-way game, and so I wonder if this is a message from Torts on that. And so I don't see an issue with it. To me, it's been working. They're still in a playoff spot. They're holding on. I don't see an issue with it. I think anyone taking an issue with it probably doesn't understand the inner workings of the locker room. And I mean, to be fair, neither do I. But it's
like no one no one knows what's going on in the locker room other than the people in the locker
Yeah.
room. And like, yeah, like the best we can do here is speculate, but I think this is a very Torts kind of thing to do. Like, he is not afraid. Like, he's always kind of had the mindset of like no one's safe, and like if you're not playing up to his standards or whatever, he is not afraid to let you know, and he is not afraid to scratch you if need be. I was kind of something that kind of surprised me in this whole situation. I wasn't surprised that he did it. I was more surprised that he refused to talk to the media after
Yeah.
about it. He's never really struck me as the type that's afraid to speak his mind, or I don't think he's afraid. I just think I don't know. I think there's something else there. Like I think if it was simple as like, oh, he's not playing as well as I would like, or he's not hustling as hard, I think he would just say that. So I think maybe there might be something going on behind the scenes. I'm not sure. But that kind of struck out as a little odd to me that he wouldn't even give a reason to the media.
Yeah.
Now that also could be that it might be something between them that he doesn't want to make public. That's totally fine. But I thought that was at least worth mentioning, that a guy notorious as Torts for speaking his mind is kind of being hushed about it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see where that one goes. If they make the playoffs, then oh well. So we'll see.
Yeah. No, like he, again, he's a great coach. I think he knows what he's doing better than most people. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see. Quick injury rundown. There was a few injuries here. I didn't write it down in the notes here, but Leo Carlson got in a bad knee-on-knee hit with, who was it? Kulikov.
Yeah, it was Kulikov.
Was it Kulikov? Oh, okay. So, he got in a bad knee-on-knee hit with Kulikov. It looked bad. He needed to get off the ice with some help. His teammates had to help him off the ice. Knee-on-knee hits are always scary. I've had my fair share. It was Vlasic. That's who he hit with. Vlasic. And knee-on-knee hits are always scary. I've dealt with my fair share. I've never had a serious injury with those, but those are never to be taken lightly. Guys' careers have ended over those. I don't think it's that bad. I would at least hope not. But that is definitely not good for the Ducks, who have already been struggling this season, to lose their second round pick, or for second overall pick. That really fucking sucks.
Yeah, and he's been having a good season too. As well, Barkov's missed the past few games. I think he's been dealing with some kind of lingering injury. They won't say what. They definitely needed him against the Predators, and the Panthers' offense has been, well, it's night and day without Barkov. They are just a different team when he's there and when he's not, and feels like everyone on the team plays better. And I mean, he's their captain. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But he's also just an incredibly talented player. So we'll see if he's back for playoffs. But if he's still battling an injury going into playoffs, that could certainly change everything in terms of how I view the Panthers.
Yeah, no, like the going in, like, I know they're praying for him to come back before the playoffs, because I know he's had his rougher season. Like, he's not having the best season he's ever had this year, but I think he's still, at least in a leadership role, he's very important to that locker room. And losing a guy like that before playoffs, especially with this amount of pressure on them this year, is not going to be easy.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that they're going to have to navigate.
Yeah.
And we can take that quick pause here.
Yeah, and I guess other captain talk is Dylan Larkin comes back. Just talked about how the Wings were spiraling without him, and
Mm-hmm.
they blow out Sorokin in the Isles. He had 2 goals.
Yep.
Everyone looked good, and it really is funny because they are just a night and day different team, and they're back in a playoff spot now, even with Washington's win yesterday. So good on Larkin for coming back. He's their lifeblood, and if they keep this playoff spot and he's still healthy going into it, that's going to make things interesting.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like he honestly couldn't have come at a better time. That game was huge for the both teams, honestly, with the Isles and Detroit. It was a really good game. Detroit just manhandled them. They looked like they looked how they should have looked all season. And like I know they had their injuries and stuff, but it's kind of night and day, like you're saying, with how they're playing when Larkin's in the lineup compared to when he's not. Because like I think that's just it shows perfectly how he has an effect on that locker room, like how he can get the guys going, and I think they love having him around, and I think he loves being there. So
yeah,
I don't know. I hope for greener pastures in Detroit. Unfortunately, they would kind of need a miracle to squeeze into the playoffs. But I mean, hey. Crazier things have happened, but I don't know. I guess only time will tell, but I think hopefully going into next season, if he can stay healthy, they can really make some noise finally.
100%.
Yeah. Some other, just kind of the last bit of injury related news. Dan Vladar seems to be out for the season with a hip surgery. I don't know. I was thinking, like, does this kind of give the Flames the kick in the ass they need to start Wolf? Because, I don't know.
It's, like, they've been giving him starts, but mostly because Markstrom's been injured. And we now know that, Vladar probably wasn't getting starts because he, too, was injured.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, like... It's just crazy to me because he's such a good prospect, and he needs development at the NHL level badly, but they're just not giving it to him unless someone's in there. And I'm really confused on why.
I have to wonder how long this injury's been going on with Vlad for, because he hasn't played in weeks prior to this surgery, and they said nothing. And so part of me wonders if he's had this lingering injury for weeks, and as soon as Markstrom got that injury, they were like, oh no. And I'm wondering if both goaltenders have been injured since before the trade deadline, and that really influenced why Markstrom never got moved. Is that maybe Markstrom wasn't injured at the time, but I think they probably had an inkling that Vladar was dealing with an injury at the time, and we're like, okay, well, if Vlad's down and we trade Markstrom, we're not comfortable with Wolf and then an emergency backup, even though, to be fair, I would be. But it goes back to the organization is so hell-bent on making the playoffs that they don't even want to risk starting Wolf more than they have to, which again is funny because they sit at 71 points, and I know they have 2 games in hand. Right now, Wildcard 2 is at 81 points with Vegas. They are 10 points behind and only a game behind Vegas. It's not happening. I know Markstrom's back from injury now, and that's huge. But even if they win out from here, Vegas has been figuring it out, and they're going to keep winning. And so I hope Wolf can get more starts, but I worry that the team is just going to overplay Markstrom to try and make that push.
Yeah, no, like, it's a tricky one. Like, I honestly don't know what you do right now if you're the Flames, because I think they've put themselves in such a hole where, like... I think like their main argument is that Wolf needs more development at the NHL level, but they're refusing him to give him more, more development at the NHL level. So it's like, where is he going to get it?
And I think it really comes down to they don't trust him to make that playoff push. And don't get me wrong, he's going to struggle, but that's the whole point. The only way he and Wolf has historically, if you look back at his stats, when he changed teams in the WHL. When he came up from the WHL to the AHL, even from AAA to the WHL, he's always struggled really hard in his first year, and the next following years are just lights out play. Like his first year in the AHL was super shaky. 2 years after,
Yeah.
goaltender of the year, AHL MVP.
Yeah.
There's nothing more for him to prove in the minors, and it frustrates me that
Yeah.
they refuse to play him. My hope is that a Markstrom trade is done over the summer and they run a Wolf and Vladar tandem. If not Vladar, then maybe a veteran that they sign. Like I was saying to some other friends that I would actually be totally cool if they signed Cam Talbot on a 1-year deal. Not only to bring him back home, but also as a good vet. Like, that's a good veteran if you're trading Markstrom to mentor Wolf from a guy who's been everywhere, seen it all, also been in the city as the starter. I couldn't think of a better guy to bring in. The only other guy I can think of is like Marc-Andre Fleury, but I believe he's going to sign an extension with Minnesota. So,
yeah, I think he's comfortable in Minnesota. I think he's chilling there for now. But like, yeah, no, I think Cam Talbot will be good. Not only to mention like the bringing him home, but also like he's been really good this season. Like he's been having a really great season.
And the thing about it is, the team has to be bad next year, because you remember with the Huberdeau trade, there was the crazy conditions on that first round pick. It was like 2 pages long.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. I still don't quite understand what.
To my understanding, the way we're going with the conditions is, next year, Montreal gets either Flames first or Florida's first, depending on whose is better. But if the Flames is top 10 protected, they automatically get Florida's. So the Flames have incentive to be bad next year. Because who cares if they lose Florida's pick? That's going to be in the 20s. And next year's draft isn't seen... It's seen similar to this year's, where there's a bit of a drop-off after 20, which is where Florida would be picking. And so the Flames have incentive to either be really bad or make a playoff push. But this team can't make a playoff push next year. With all the pieces they've lost, it's not going to be possible. And so they have real incentive to trade Markstrom and be bad next year, to tank for a better pick, trade out guys, and then they don't lose their pick. Because if their pick is 11th overall next season, that goes to Montreal. And for a team that's trying, and I put in quotations, trying to retool, you can't lose a high first round pick in a retool. It's shooting yourself in the foot. It's setting yourself back years. So, and I'm sure they know this. Like they're not stupid. This has probably been hanging over them the whole time. One of Brad Treliving's last great gifts to the team, and so they have incentive to start Wolf in a 1A 1B role. Let him struggle, and then the year later, when you're trying to be competitive, he's going to be better. And so, to me, it just makes too much sense.
Yeah, no, like that's something that's always really frustrated with me with the Flames, is they just seem like an organization that doesn't quite understand the situation that they're in right now. Especially ever since Gaudreau decided to not to resign. I think that threw them for a loop. I don't think they were expecting it. Like I think like there's an argument to be made that maybe they should have had like a backup plan, like a worst case scenario plan. And I think that's fair. I think no matter your circumstances, no matter if you just won a Stanley Cup or whatever, you should always kind of plan for the worst case 100%. Scenario. The Flames were facing like not too long ago. Like they lost 2 of their faces of their team. Tkachuk, I think, went about it in a much more team-friendly manner. I think he did the best he could in the situation. But like, I think they got scared. I don't think, and I was telling a buddy of mine this too as well. Like, I don't think they quite understand the roster they have right now. I don't think they quite understand like the strengths and disadvantages of a lot of their players. Because they were relying on, for the longest time, they've kind of backed off that nowadays. But at first they were definitely relying on Huberdeau to be like their next Matthew Tkachuk, where he just scores at will. And that's never really been his game. He's always been much more of a playmaker. He's always been much more of a passer. and he'll get goals, but you need to put him with that elite goal scorer for him to truly flourish.
Almost like if you put him with Matthew Tkachuk, it would be a beautiful line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was thinking the other day, like, if Matthew Tkachuk, I know this is impossible, but if Matthew Tkachuk was still on the team, the Flames would be lights out right now. The Flames would be so fucking good.
They would be. And I think your only hope as a Flames fan, I think they're picking 14th overall right now. They're most likely going to go deep.
Yeah.
But if there is any chance in the world that they can draft Tija Ginla and put him on Huberdeau's, like Huberdeau left wing, Tija Ginla right wing, that guy's a sniper. That's the exact kind of mold that you need to put on Huberdeau's line. It's tough with the Flames. I agree that it's just basic business to always plan for the worst case scenario. And I know the irony in saying that because a lot of businesses don't and then end up getting caught. And the Flames are no different. They, to my understanding, with what Craig Conroy said, up to the last few minutes before he made his decision, they totally thought Gaudreau was going to sign the deal they put on the table. And to my understanding, it was an $11 million deal for 8 years. I think it was around $11 million, give or take, like about $500,000. But they were going to sign him to that 8-year deal. They thought it was totally secured, and then all of a sudden, that random change and everything goes out the window, and they had zero contingency plan. And I think Tkachuk gave them the best return they could have. The thing that sucks is it had to be Brad Treliving in that position, because Brad Treliving would never commit to a rebuild. I think if Craig Conroy was the one in charge, I think he would have traded Tkachuk for a more futures-oriented package rather than we need to plug the holes and win now. Even though, if you lose Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk, it doesn't matter who you bring back. Your team is going to be worse. And with, like, the entire Flames offense was built around them. You look at all the pieces that they got. You look at how that 2022 team functioned. Everything ran through Gaudreau and Tkachuk. Like, I swear to God, every single time they were even able to break out of the zone, Gaudreau was on the ice. And it was the perfect system. And so you can't bring Huberdeau back, and that's not to mention Weegar, who has been great. In all of this, it's funny that Weegar has actually been the best player that we received. And, I mean, I figured he was going to be good. He was great with Florida. It was just he was never given the role he truly needed. But he's been incredible for the Flames. And it sucks because imagine if the Flames were competitive and had Weegar playing at this level. They would be a force to be reckoned with, and that really, it's just another classic Brad Treliving blunder added to the massive list.
I'm just super curious what exactly was going through their heads in the trade deadline time, because they really did blow up their defense, and then really didn't do much to replace
they did.
Like
they brought back Daniil Miramanov from Vegas, who has been playing really well, actually. And dare I say, he might be our power play quarterbacking defenseman of the future. Like, he has a very high offensive upside, great offensive IQ. His defensive game needs some work. But I could say that about a lot of defensemen in the league. It's funny because you blow up the D-core, but you still expect the team to be good, and that's counterintuitive to me, because in what world does trading away your best defensive pair, and they were the best defensive pair on the team, Hanifin and Tanev, although Tanev just makes everyone he plays with work better. He could be put with anyone and make that pair shine.
He's doing the same thing at Vegas.
It's you trade away that pair. Of course the team is going to be worse. Of course they're going to bleed more goals. They're playing AHL defensemen. Their only two real NHL level defensemen are Weegar and Anderson. Of course they're going to have issues. And I'll say Miramanov is a NHL caliber defenseman, I suppose, but more of a second pair, third pair guy. And so it just frustrates me because I like Craig Conroy's moves. I like that he traded so many guys away that weren't going to re-sign and were at their highest peaks of value. I like the returns he got for pretty much everyone, but it's so counterintuitive that the team is then like, oh no, we're still pushing for playoffs, when they could have said, oh no, this is the best opportunity to go tank for a better pick. And the top 15 of this draft is seen as being really strong. And I'm sure we're still going to be picking in the top 15, but I'll be really upset if the team goes on a bit of a heater here and misses out on the playoffs by a few points, just like they did last year and in previous years. It is funny. I don't know if you watched the hockey guy video recently where he mentioned that the Flames feel like they're stuck in the end of the Iginla days again, where the team is trying so hard to make a push, but the roster is just strung together with duct tape and chicken scratch.
Yeah.
And
it's so true. It all just come back to I just don't think this team understands the position they're in fully. I think any other team would look at our roster, look at our record, look at where the team's headed, and just be like, okay, yeah, time to tank.
Yeah.
And that's where I thought they were going. At first, when I first saw the Hannafin and Tanev trades, I was like, okay, yeah, we're tanking finally.
Yeah,
they're finally gonna tank, and then they just are refusing. It's really frustrating because they would give their fans so much more peace if they were just okay, we're rebuilding. Blow it up, we're rebuilding. But they're just refusing to do that. They're still pushing for the playoffs, and I think I was mentioning this to you earlier. It's the best they can hope for in the playoffs is a first round exit.
Because they are not making it past the first round. I mean, let's be real. If this team matches up with Colorado or Vancouver in the first round, you're getting I look at any team. The only team I could possibly see them beating in a 7-game series is the Kings. They're not beating Dallas. They're not beating Winnipeg. They're not beating the Oilers, most certainly. The Oilers they have their number. Mm-hmm. They're not beating the Preds. They're not beating the Knights. It feels like any other team would have pulled the plug and been after trade deadline, you know what? The season's a wash. Let's go get a nice draft pick and just develop our guys. Who cares if we lose?
Yeah.
What we care about is our guys making progress. And I look at the Red Wings last year. They were close to a playoff spot at trade deadline time, and they were just you know what? We don't have it this year. Trade Bertuzzi, trade Hronek, trade some other guys, and just tank for a better pick. And now look at them this year. They're in a playoff spot. At the same time, after last year, they decided, you know what? This just wasn't the year. To me, I see nothing wrong with saying this isn't our year at trade deadline time. Mm-hmm. I can understand the perspective of people being upset if from the get-go on the season, it's okay, we don't have it this year. But to me, when it's trade deadline time and there's only about a quarter of the season left, I see no issue with the team pulling the plug and just going for a better pick. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Fair. They're playing Vancouver tonight. I fully expect them to lose, but at the same time, knowing this team, they're going to go on a run and miss the playoffs by a couple points. But it does bring up an interesting kind of thought piece is the New Jersey Devils were really close to a Markstrom trade, to my understanding. It was a matter of ownership nixed the deal. There was a deal in place. Markstrom was asked to waive his no-trade clause and got pretty pissed off that a trade wasn't completed. And I totally understand, because imagine being told, hey, can you waive your no-trade clause to go play in Jersey? And he's like, oh, yeah, actually, Jersey would sound really nice. And then they come back to you and say, oh, just kidding. We're not actually trading you to Jersey, lol. It's...
Yeah, and making a huge public spectacle.
And making a huge, huge stink about it. But
I remember trade deadline week. I was refreshing Twitter every 5 minutes just waiting for that Markstrom
I was fully...
I was certain that it was going to happen.
As soon as the news broke that he had been asked to waive his no-trade clause, and the thing that was holding up was the package surrounding him, I fully thought it was getting done. All of the insiders, even Elliot Friedman, initially said, I think this is going to get done, because you just don't go to Markstrom and ask him... Markstrom's an emotional guy. He's got a family here. Yep. You don't just ask a guy, hey, are you ready to go move to New Jersey? As they're in, remember, they were in New Jersey on their road trip at the time. They were playing the Islanders the next day. And so Markstrom even said he fully expected to stay in New Jersey, that he would not be returning home with them on the trip. To do that to a guy with a family that just rooted down in Calgary and then say, psych, I mean, I'd be pissed. I would be fully pissed. And I'm sure the New Jersey Devils are pissed because although Jake Allen has been a nice little stopgap, he's just that. He's a stopgap. He's not a long-term starter. And while they've been playing better with him in net, I say better relatively because it's very hot and cold.
Allen had an amazing save against. I'll drop in the chat here. But he had an amazing save against Pittsburgh.
I was gonna say he was lights out against the Jets the other night. He's been giving them the goaltending that they need, but it's not enough. They're at 72 points in the standings. They've played the same amount of games as Detroit, and they're 6 points behind. Is not good math.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure they have a pretty bad strength of schedule remaining, and so it's going to be really tough for them. You look at this Devils season and you just wonder, what if they fired Lindy Ruff at the start of the season? What if they made that Markstrom trade early in the season? Because this Devils team, they are not as bad as they appear to be.
Yeah, no, like New Jersey's been one of the most interesting teams to me recently because on paper they should be good. Like on paper they should be fighting for a playoff spot. They should be in like the mix. But in practice, like their defense is not very good. Luke Hughes he has his moments, but he is still learning. He's still developing. And like, I think playing with his brother will speed up his development, but I don't think it's going to be the be all end all of his development like they thought it would. I think going in this season, they were like, oh, they played on the ODR together all the time. They're going to have like lights out chemistry. But I just don't think it's translated as well as they'd hoped. Goaltending's been a consistent issue. They completely switched up their tandem at the deadline. Jake Allen has been playing. I think he's been playing really good for the amount of help that he's been getting on defense. But he's facing like 30 shots a game.
Yeah, their defense just bleeds shots.
Yeah, so I think for what he is working with in New Jersey, he's doing a really good job. I just dropped that clip of him and that save against Crosby. Unreal save. So he's Jake Allen's one of the most interesting guys to me because he was very much this is gonna sound not like a compliment, but it's meant to be. He sounds like he reminds me of Mike Smith in a way, where he shows flashes of brilliance and flashes of wow, this guy could be like a top 10 goaltender in the league. And then he just lets in a shot that's like, how the hell did you just let that in?
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean? Like it goes from wow, this guy's for real, like Vezina candidate, to oh my god, like how's this guy even?
And that's really why he's been a backup kind of. I know he was more of the starter in Montreal, but that's just because they had nobody to start. Like they needed him to be their starter, but even in St. Louis and even starting out in Montreal, he was Price's backup, and I think he's just a great backup / 1B if you need him to be. The issue is that yes, he's playing well enough right now, but that gas is going to run out of the tank, and we saw it with Montreal. You overplay him, and it's like a lot of these more journeyman backup goaltenders. They just don't have it in them, and that's no slight on Allen. It's just the way he's been his whole career, and I've only heard great things about him as a locker room guy, and he was apparently a huge reason why St. Louis won that cup in 2019 because I don't know if you've heard the stories, but he was mimicking Tuukka Rask's playing style during their practices in the finals. And O'Reilly, I think it was O'Reilly who said that like Jake Allen was so good at mimicking how Tuukka Rask played that it felt like they just knew what to do in every scenario because Allen was so great in practice. And so
I saw a funny video with that where they showed like kind of side by side of him mimicking Rask in the warm-ups, and then they showed like another side by side of, you remember the
Kipper kid?
Yeah, Kipper kid, and then they're like, it's the Kipper kid, he's grown up.
Yeah, Allen's and that's it's so incredibly valuable to have is
Yep.
someone who can, that to me that's the perfect backup goaltender, is someone who can come in, they know what their role is, but they help the team in any way they can. And I think about it, if they get Markstrom in the summer, I mean that's a great goaltending tandem of Markstrom and Jake Allen. Like that is
Yeah.
two goaltenders who,
Yeah.
like Markstrom's going to get injured. Okay, he's unfortunately
Yeah.
an injury-prone goaltender, but in those like couple games where you're going to need Allen, that's completely fine. You will be fine playing Allen in those games, and the defense should get better. What I'm interested in is who's the coach next season, because Travis Green's the interim head coach. I don't think he's a very good head coach. I mean, we saw in Vancouver how awful that was. I think he's a better assistant coach than anything. And so I'm wondering, like, do they go veteran coach? Do they go young, kind of unproven coach? I'm thinking they probably go more towards veteran coach. God, please be Daryl Sutter, because that would be hilarious. I'll be.
He would.
It could happen.
He plays an aggressive game. He has the shelf life of milk, but I think short term, Daryl Sutter could be an okay fit.
It really depends on how do the Devils see their window. And to me, their window is as open as long as they have Jack Hughes, Luke Hughes, Jesper Bratt, and Timo Meier. Like, those guys are all locked up long term. You have all those guys locked up long term. They are barely even entering their primes. So to me, it's like you have your core. You need to push all your chips in. Now, I would not hire Daryl Sutter, but I would make a trade for Markstrom 100% if I'm serious about being a contender, because you look at that goaltending in the East, and part of why they lose that series against Carolina last year, even though Schmid did have some good play here and there, it was largely on goaltending and coaching. And while they fixed the coaching for the most part, knock on wood, depending on who they hire, but goaltending was really the other thing that Carolina just destroyed them. They were getting blown out. Like, there was multiple 6-goal games from Carolina in that series, and they just had no answers. And so I'll be interested to see what they do. If they make the right choice, I mean, the East is loaded, but they can certainly bring themselves back. And they're not a bad team. If anything, they feel kind of like how the Flames did last year. Or more like how Nashville did last year, where they're not an awful team. It's just they're in this weird kind of transition year. But I think it was necessary. I don't think Lindy Ruff is ever going to be the true answer. So I'll be interested in who they hire. I'm hoping it'll be like Jay Woodcroft or Mike Sullivan or...
Oh, Jay Woodcroft would be a great...
He would be a fantastic
pick. Yeah, I think Jay Woodcroft would be a great pick because he's really good with young players. He would be really good with Jack Eichel. He'd be really good with Jack Eichel. He'd be really good with Jack Hughes and Luke Hughes. And also, I'm just reading here, I just found this out. Their goalie coach for the Devils was Jake Allen's goalie coach when he won the Cup in St. Louis. So that could definitely help, and I think that definitely helps. I think people underestimate how much that has an effect, like having past success with someone on your team. Like, we've seen it this year with Knobloch and McDavid, like having a guy that you know from your past seasons or even your time in the minors, like that can really help to have just kind of a familiar face, someone you're comfortable with, especially going into a new environment. And I honestly don't envy Jake Allen's position in this, because there is a lot of pressure on the Devils going into this year. They were expected to be, some were saying they were contenders. I didn't really subscribe to that entirely, but I think they were definitely going to be a hot team. So going into that environment and kind of hoping to switch it around, especially since goaltending is one of their major issues. I definitely don't envy him. So having that familiar face in a time of success will definitely help, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
And I also would be remiss not to mention that they're also injured to hell and back. Like, just looking at their injury reserve right now, it's kind of eye-watering. Dougie Hamilton, Nathan Bastian. Michael McLeod is out for different reasons, but also Cal Foote is out. Jonas Siegenthaler,
Siegenthaler,
that's how it's pronounced.
One of their best teams.
Siegenthaler, he's all out. Like, I get it. Like, I get they were kind of put at a disadvantage going in. But, like, I am curious to see what this team will do with Allen, with their new goaltending tandem of Kakkonen and Jake Allen, once Dougie Hamilton, Bastian, and Siegenthaler are all back. I think that'll be really interesting, and I think they could they'd definitely be more deadly than they are.
I think
right now.
next year's their year. I think before the draft, they go and make a trade for a goaltender, whether that be Markstrom or whatnot, because they really don't need their first-round pick. They have a very wealthy prospect pool, which they can definitely dip into to use as trade capital. And also with the injury report, that's not to mention the numerous times Hughes, Meyer, and Bratt have been injured this year too. And they lost Dougie Hamilton pretty early on. And to lose Dougie early into the season, that was like the precursor for what was to come. So this just seems like it's one of those teams always go through this where they have those wash years where everyone's injured. Like I think about Tampa last year and how they were just beat up to hell and back after all those cup runs. And well, you saw it. Even though they were still able to make the playoffs, they had their work cut out for them against Toronto. So I'll be interested to see where the Devils go. But funny enough, speaking of injured teams and playoff runs, the Vegas Golden Knights, as I'm sure
everyone's favorite team,
everyone's aware, are back at it again with what we'll call the cap circumvention. And even though it is perfectly legal for every team to do as part of the CBA, it still doesn't make it feel cheap. And even though...
From what I heard, this was brought up at the GM's conference, which is good. This changes, like Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts brought up a great idea where if a player is on LTIR going into the playoffs, they should, by rule, not be allowed to play at least in, I think, the first round. And I think that's a great idea. The only issue I can see with that in my head is just spitballing. A team would still be able to circumvent it just by having them play the last game before the playoffs.
I think
that makes sense.
Well, the reasoning for what Elliot was saying is that if they activate them for the last game, then they activate their cap hit. And like if you remember Kucherov 3 seasons ago, comes back game one, not to mention back in the 2010s where there was, I think, the 2013 run where Patrick Kane came back game one fully healthy, and they would go on to win the cup. And the Lightning were $9 million over the cap because Kucherov was on LTIR, they were able to make the deals that they did. And he comes back game one fully healthy. I'm pretty sure he scored 2 goals that game. Like he had been healthy for weeks at that point. And if they had forced him to come back in game 82, then they reactivate his full cap hit, and all of a sudden that throws everything into flux because, well, that's $9 million that you have to clear off of your roster, which you can't exactly do. And so I like the idea. If anything, I think it's a fun idea because I certainly think there'll be some teams that think, you know what, we can make it past round one. Like, they take the gamble of like, hey, we think we can make it past round one regardless, so we're going to do this anyways. And to me, that almost gamifies it a little more, which I like. Like, it forces you to take that risk. I think any more than round one is a bit, like I've heard some people say, oh, the salary cap should count in the playoffs, but that's not a good idea. And it's been brought up numerous times why that isn't a good idea, so I won't regurgitate. But I like the Game 82 idea because most teams will probably look at that and say, okay, we can't spend too high over the cap. We have to give ourselves wiggle room so that if one of our guys, like, if we want them in round one, let's say, like, it's Florida in round one and they're going to play Boston in round one. Well, you want all your guys back. Like, you're not going to want to go into the first round without Barkov, let's say, if Barkov was on LTIR. But there are some teams that would look at their potential matchups and say, you know what, maybe we keep this guy on LTIR, use that space to go grab other guys, and then, you know what, we think we can win the first round regardless and then get a huge boost in the second round. And so I almost like because realistically, if you're going to use this, and I know that the CBA has to be changed to make this work, but and to my understanding from what Elliot Freeman said, he thinks that a lot of players would support this. It kind of adds that risk that you have to prepare for of like, can we make this work? And should we make this trade knowing that we may have to ice a bit of a shorter roster without one of our stars in round one? And so it'll make teams actually think instead of right now where they're just like, there's right now there's incentive for teams to just keep all of their guys on LTIR until game one.
Yeah.
Especially with how playoff seeding works right now, where one plays 4 and 2 plays 3. Which I hate. I hate the conference, like the divisional format, where like the Kings and the Oilers are going to play in the first round again, 3 years in a row, which is just nobody likes that. And so
it's funny to me because we're still living in LA's head rent free, and I'll always cherish that. But yeah, no, I get what you mean. I was really hoping that we would at least play like Vancouver or Vegas or someone else like. Because it like I think like Gary Bettman's sorry to interrupt you by the way, but like I think Gary Bettman's argument is like, oh, it creates rivalries, and it's like, yeah, like that's true, but I think also it creates rivalries
that feel forced,
and like if you switch it up, that would create new rivalries, you know, like we get it, like Edmonton and the Kings are big rivals. Like every team, like even when it's not the playoffs, I love watching those games because they're very pushy. They're very aggressive. And you're even seeing like new rivalries spark up out of nowhere. Like last night, I would argue since last night, Carolina and Washington have 100%. A pretty big rivalry. Like that would be a good rivalry too. It was a pushy game. They were not getting along. It got physical, fast, high scoring, everything you want in a rivalry. And I love that too. I love a good fight, good scrap. Like I love a good Boston, Toronto game. I like a good Boston anyone game because it seems like they're rivals with everybody. But like I get where he's coming from, but I think to switch it up, you would not only get just a variety of different matchups, so it's not like, oh, who's going to win the LA versus Edmonton series again? Probably Edmonton.
I don't think anyone in their right mind would pick the Kings.
Yeah, especially this year because the last 2 years you could maybe make an argument for LA, and I will give LA credit. They always made us fight for it, and they did make me nervous. But like I honestly this year it feels more of the same.
And to your point, like, I understand what Bettman's saying, but it feels like the rivalries are more forced now. Like, the NHL used to have rivalries with the 1 versus 8 format. I mean, the Kings and the Sharks were a huge rivalry. Detroit and Chicago before the divisional change. Like, there were some great rivalries. Even original six rivalry. Like Washington and the Penguins before the divisional format. And, like, there were the Leafs and the Bruins. Like, a lot of these teams would meet anyways, but it felt less artificial and more like, oh man, like you're hyped, and you didn't know who was going to play who until closer. Like we've known for a good month now that LA and the Oilers were going to play each other, just with how like the 2 versus 3 system works, which sucks because part of the fun of the playoffs back in the day was being like, oh man, who's going to be facing who. Now we really only get that with the wild cards, and I hate that. Like, I think it's far more fun when so many of the matchups are unknown and you're like games away from the playoffs starting and you just have no idea. And then there's that huge surprise of like, oh man, this team just made a huge push and now they're in playing this team. And so, that's a whole topic for another day, like the playoff seeding discussion. But
yeah, we could honestly do a whole episode just about that. But like as an Oilers fan, I want to face LA because I think it would be the easiest matchup. But as a hockey fan, I would much rather see like a Vancouver Oilers, Vegas Oilers.
To me, like the NHL playoffs, I think are the best sports playoffs, like period. Like I love NFL playoffs. Don't get me wrong. I love college football playoffs. March Madness is great, and even the MLB playoffs are fun. But when the NHL playoffs are at their best, they're like second to none. Like it is the most electric atmosphere. You think of all those crazy game tying OT winners in the playoffs and how literal legends are born. Like there will be guys who are enshrined for a random Game 6 overtime winner in the second round that helped propel their team far. And it feels like with these matchups, it just feels forced, and we don't really have any more of those hero moments. Like I can think of so many like insane goals from like Malkin or Crosby or Ovechkin, or there was that one Kuznetsov goal when they finally overcame the Penguins, and it's you don't get those hero moments with the current formatting, and to an extent, it also feels a little, just to wrap it back into the what we were talking about earlier, it feels a little forced still with the LTIR abuse, and so I'll be interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, Vegas is an interesting one this year, specifically because I think like they like there's that video, like that screenshot circling around, like Mark Stone has been on IR pretty much around the same time for the last 4 years in a row. And I think, that's definitely damning, and that's definitely incriminating. I just think they, this year, I don't know if that's entirely on purpose, just because...
He has a lacerated spleen
if you look,
this year. Like, that's the one thing I will say where, like, to my understanding, he might not even come back for the playoffs because of how significant of an injury it is.
Yeah. And if you're looking at the Vegas right now, they're not comfortably in the playoffs. They're not. They have been struggling. They're 4-6-0 in their last 10.
And St. Louis is knocking on their door, especially if St. Louis gets a win over Minnesota tonight. They are knocking on their door.
Like they aren't contenders, and they're not like they weren't last year as well, but like they aren't like the favorites going into the playoffs. And I don't think if they did do it on purpose, which I don't entirely think they did this year, where putting Mark Stone on IR for cap circumvention reasons, I think that was not a smart move if that's what they were doing, because I think they would really like to have him back right now. And like, I think they did a lot of good things at the deadline, adding Hanifin, and all that. But I think, I don't know, like they're still not comfortable. St. Louis is breathing down their necks. The Predators have taken first in the wild card and have ran away with it. And they're not looking back. So I don't know. Like I think this is the best year in terms of the argument that they're not doing it on purpose.
100%.
But like still, it's not.
Given their history, it's hard to not think foul play. I think this one's different. The lacerated spleen, to my understanding, could keep him out a very, very long time. It's not when it comes to organs, like those are not injuries you want to play around with. And previously it's been his back, and you could argue that his back, that's where a bit of cap circumvention comes in, but it feels different because in previous years they were just steamrolling teams, whereas now it really does feel like the mood has changed. Like they know they're not going to get him back and they're panicking. Whereas in previous years it was like, oh no, Mark Stone's coming back. Like we're fine. We know we're going to be good. And so I'll be interested to see where they go. I think they still end up holding on to their playoff spot, but I wouldn't be shocked if St. Louis ends up squeaking them out. We'll see what happens. But I'm definitely... Depending on the series, they're not going to be my favorites in the first round. I'll say as much, but playoff seeding is a little weird right now. Like it really does depend on who they play.
Yeah, to me, honestly, like I'm very curious to see if they do make the playoffs, where they end up, how that's all going to go down. Just because I think it's going to be a pretty tricky one. I don't think they're going to repeat. I don't think they're going to win the cup. But I think, I don't know, these playoffs, man, like we talked about last episode, but like these playoffs, like we're going to be
good. We're shaping up to have a really good year. And I think even the hockey guy alluded to it. Shout out the hockey guy. That you know
he's like the sponsor of our
it feels
episode.
like this is the year, much like 2019, where a lot of brackets are going to get busted early. Like it really does feel like this is going to be the year of the underdog heroes, the upsets, the crazy games, and so I'm excited. I'm more excited for this year's playoffs than I think I was last year's, even though I don't have a dog in the race. Like it just so much more intensity, but I think that's probably good enough on the Vegas side. Rapid fire.
Tired of
Rapid
talking
fire.
about it.
Because we're about 2 weeks post deadline. Who pick one winner and one loser, and maybe you could do it from like each conference. But in your mind, each conference, what team won and what team lost?
Ooh, I'll have to look at the conferences. So immediately the first people that come to mind as far as winners go, and it's funny because they didn't really, a trade wasn't their biggest win during the deadline, but the Vancouver Canucks. Signing Pettersson for that long, for that money, is fucking massive. 100%. That is a huge W for them. Also, just like I'm just scrolling through some of the trades now. Adding, I know he's a rental, but Lindholm, great addition. Depth they needed. And Cyrillic, like I think Vancouver has made it very apparent that they are all in this year. They like their roster, they like their odds, and they're not shy 100%. About pushing. And I think good on them.
Yeah, for me, my Western Conference winner would probably be, I think, the Winnipeg Jets. I think it's easy to say Colorado, but I look at what Winnipeg did. They get Monahan. They get Toffoli. They shore up their defense a little bit, and they paid pennies for Toffoli. And Toffoli's been playing great for them. I think he has like 5 goals in 4 games played. Like he's been awesome. Yeah. And he's the exact secondary.
I was gonna ask. Like I was gonna ask. Like, does he age? Because he's not young.
He's like 30.
He's got Benjamin. Yeah. He's got like Benjamin Button syndrome, where he's just like aging.
He's a guy who will play into his late 30s because he plays a very like. He's what I loved about Toffoli on the Flames is that he's super malleable. He can adapt to any system and make it work. He's the exact type of guy you want on a contender because he's not going to be a top line winger, but as a top 6, top 9 goal scoring winger, you can't really ask for much better. And especially at the price they paid for him, I think they took a massive, massive W. Western Conference loser, in my opinion, has to be the Kings because they did absolutely nothing, literally nothing at the deadline. And when you know you're about to play Edmonton in a month, I don't see why you wouldn't try and shore up your defense at least a little bit.
They needed to get a forward. Fucking bad. Like they needed a forward.
Really and I know they were in the market for Toffoli. I know they had that Allmark trade that almost happened, but for me, it's like it's too little, too late. I think obviously that's not going to be the only reason why I don't think they'll beat the Oilers, but it certainly doesn't help. Who do you have losing from the West?
From the West, the loser. Like honestly, I was gonna say LA, but part of me, I know you're not gonna like it, but part of me is just like the Flames.
That's
because
fair.
They blew up their roster. Their D-line at least. They blew up their blue line. Sent a lot of guys out. They sent Tanev out. They sent Lindholm out. They sent
Hanifin, Zadorov,
and all that. Yeah, all those guys are gone. And like if you look at their roster now, like they don't really have replacements for them. They don't really have they have some good guys like. They trade well for the idea of players like Kuzmenko was a great ad in the Lindholm trade, and all that. But like they have really good ideas for guys and hopes for guys, but I just tangible right now. I think they didn't do much to help them in the here and the now. I could be completely wrong, and this could age like milk in a few years, but. I think like as of right now, they really just didn't do too much.
I agree.
But yeah, my personal winner for the Eastern I just had it. Where did it go? Would have to probably be. I literally just had it. Where did it go? Carolina. Yeah. Carolina. Adding just purely on that Jake Gensel trade, that was perfect for them. That is as if they needed more offensive talent. They got it, and my God, they are 100%. Terrifying.
Who do you have losing from the East?
Loser, New York, like the Islanders, like it was the same thing with the LA, like they just didn't really do anything. I feel like every year it's the same shit with them, where it's like, oh, what are they going to do at the deadline? This is their year. They need to do something at the deadline, and then they just don't.
I agree.
So it's like, I don't know what to expect from them anymore.
I think my loser is probably going to be the Devils, mostly because they didn't get that Markstrom deal done. And I think if they were to have gotten that Markstrom deal done, we might be talking about them in a different light right now. Like, we might be talking about them as serious, like, oh man, these guys are contenders now. And again, the Jake Allen trade already been talked about to death. I think it's a good trade for what it is. They could have done more. My winner, also no surprise, because I also like the team, is the Hurricanes. Adding Gensel and Kuznetsov is playing great too, and at the price they paid for pennies on the dollar. Like, this is a team where when Carolina makes a trade, any GM trying to trade with them should just hang up the phone, because when they call you to make a trade, they're going to rob you. Like, they don't make trades often, but when they do,
they don't think like
they're very analytical and smart. And so when they make a trade, it's because they know this is the guy and we don't care what we pay and we're going to fleece you. Like, they paid pennies on the dollar for Gensel, pennies on the dollar for Kuznetsov, and they've been great. And, one thing I think is, it's not like they're just trading for two great players. They're trading for two of the best playoff players in the past decade. Like, Jake Gensel is, I think, like, top... Jake Gensel and Kuznetsov are both top 10 in points in the playoffs over the past decade. Jake Gensel, I believe, is, like, top 3 in goal scoring. Like, you talk about needing that extra push in the playoffs, you get two of the best playoff players who also played in the East in the same division, which helps because they know the competition better. Like, that both of those trades, you look at this Carolina team, and they really are treating this as this is our all-in year. And so I'm interested to see where it goes. But, if they win the Cup this year, I mean, we're going to be calling them geniuses. And even then, I still think, even if they don't win the Cup, I mean, great trades. So, shout out Carolina.
For sure. Yeah, no, Carolina, playing 4D chess as usual. They really kind of put on display the value of... analytics and a good analytics department, a good scouting department, good all that. So I don't know. I've been saying it for years. Underrated departments, analytics and scouting. That's pretty much it. Did you have anything else?
No, not as of right now. It's going to be a big week for playoff seeding, so we'll see where it goes.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to add, just to get off the record, I'm going to have a recap video up by Monday, hopefully. But that last game, Seattle versus Arizona, I just wanted to shout it out. I think they win the award for the most boring game of the year. No one scored until there was 12 minutes left in the game. And then somewhat everything happened at once. And then Seattle blew it and then lost in overtime. I was really pissed off because the game went to overtime because the boring game would continue. And it did. And shout out them to historic franchises.
Congrats on them to playing the worst game of the year.
Yeah, just absolutely wasting my time. And, we're all here for it. So good on them. Thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed. Mitch will be back for the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to like and subscribe. More episodes to come. And thank you so much. Bye.